Alrighty, in today's episode, we are going to do a second part on my 1974 Dodge W200 Power Wagon. Now, we picked this truck up close to 5, maybe 10 episodes ago. That is my bad, but better late than never, right? So in the last episode, we saved this thing off of a farm where it sat for 15 years due to a blown-up rear end. Now, the rear end had been rebuilt, but never finished the installation, as we will find today, and things like brakes and other things were not hooked up. So we're going to fix all that and do a bunch of other work to get this thing running better and ready to go back to the road. All right, lovely. I haven't had to deal with this in a while, but my 97 Ford front axle's like this. And to actually get the drum off, and on that case, it's the disc brake, so it's different, but to get the drum off, you have to pull the axle, and then there's probably a nut or two in here that you have to undo to get this whole hub off. It's not bad, it's just a real pain in the neck compared to trucks where you just pull the tire and the drum comes right off, but nothing to it but to do it, I guess. So let's pull this axle out. Well, as you can tell by the TJ top here, it started raining, but we have arisen victorious. So I found the key. I haven't dealt with those little guys in a while, but the key is just tapped right next to them and they'll pop right out of their spot, thankfully. So let's pull the shaft out. Now, like I said in the last video, I think this thing, I've been told this thing was rebuilt, but it was put back together dry. It sat for 15 years, so I'm a little concerned about what I might find, but axle shaft has some surface rust in the middle, nothing I'm concerned about. Looks like they put a nice bead of silicone on there. Yeah, it's all greased up, looks fresh. So they didn't put all the locking tabs down, but it looks like they put down a few of them. So knock those off and then see if we can get this nut off here. Now, there were plenty of signs on this rear end that someone had been in here very recently, including the flange nuts being kind of mangled. So it took a little bit to get them off, but I was able to get them off in one piece and reuse them. So the more I think about this and the further I take it apart, I seem to recall the guy actually telling me it's got brand new brakes on the rear. Now, who knows if they did the wheel cylinders, which is the thing I'm concerned about. And we're this far, so we're definitely going to check. But it seems like we got to back off the shoes at least to get this drum off, which sometimes you can avoid doing, but oh great, now it's hailing. All right, it took about 30 minutes of wrestling with it, but finally got the drum free here. So we got one missing spot on the drum that may or may not have been caused by me, but it looks like we got a brand new seal in here. The bearings are in beautiful shape. All this grease still looks good, and I would go ahead and say that the shoes are brand new. But, and all the hardware definitely looks brand new. But that wheel cylinder, which is the part we're in here for, of course looks old, or at least, I don't know, it definitely looks older than the rest of it. So they must not have messed with it the last time. Now I get the lovely task of doing that. So we'll have to break down these brakes, no pun intended, get all of the hardware out of here, pretty much take the whole thing apart as if you were putting new brakes on it, but we're gonna clean these up, reuse them because they look brand new. Throw the wheel cylinders in it I got from O'Reilly's and reassemble. But for now, I'm going to get this brake drum out of the rain because it's been intermittently hailing and raining on me this whole time. So, well, the storm finally caught up that they were promising. So, I think I'm done for the night. We got it bandaged up pretty good. I don't think I'm too scared about it getting wet in there. So, we'll just come back tomorrow. Thankfully, the storm actually held up long enough for me to get back out there and pull the brakes that night, which was nice because I did not want any chance of the spindle getting wet and rusting up on me. And while we're talking about the weather, I am a first-time Midwesterner. I've only lived in Iowa now a year, and the increase in hail that I've seen really sucks, especially when you don't have a big enough garage to put your trucks in. And this is the first project truck I actually really cared about the body on, and of course, I buy it the day before a hailstorm. All right, got our used brakes back on here, snuck the new wheel cylinder in, and really everything looks really good. When I cleaned it up, those brake shoes are brand new, I bet. So I don't know why they didn't replace the wheel cylinder. That's the first thing I would replace if I was them, if I was in here, but whatever. Did it now. It's probably good that I did it now anyway. That's not good to sit for 15 years. So got one side done. Also painted up the backing plate just to prevent any further rust. And we are ready to stab the drum back on it. So that's cool. Okay, putting that back together temporarily for the night. I'm done for the evening, and just want to make sure no water gets in there. Alrighty, got some parts from the mail here. Some 2/16 nickel copper brake lines. So I ordered this online because it was about 1/3 cheaper than what O'Reilly's or AutoZone was selling, so I figured it was worth the wait. This is supposed to be a real copper nickel stuff, not lined or coated, I guess. Comes with a bunch of fittings, thankfully. I got this thick piece of aluminum TIG wire here. I took a little chomp out of the end, where I think the end should be, with my Leatherman. So we're going to outstrut this guy and try and replicate that. The nice thing about this copper nickel stuff is it's super bendy, so just gotta get kind of close. It's actually just as flexible as that TIG wire, pretty much. This copper nickel stuff is about 10 times better to work with in about every single way than the old steel line that we used to sell. But I still sell it. And I think it's supposed to be obviously more corrosive resistant. Alright, got the first line ran for now. Gonna have to go through and kind of try and straighten it up and get it sitting in the hangers nicely. This copper nickel stuff is so nice because you can just form it around by hand, but it's hard to make nice even bends. But happy to say the rear axle brakes are all hooked up. Now we just need to run the line from this hanger all the way to the front. So probably won't show that because it's going to be a lot of fighting that line through past the tank, and it's just going to be a blast. We're also going to have to build a new bracket for this because this hose, while it will reach up there, won't leave much room for stretch during suspension cycles. So it's the same length as the old one. I guess they never got a lifted one before, so oh well. We can make brackets pretty easily. That's one thing I can do. That's the last thing I want to see. And then we had yet again another hill.
Didn't know that was coming today. Lovely.
Alrighty, so we have our brake line ran all the way to the front to the proportioning valve. I had a tough time finding a big enough fitting for the proportioning valve, so that was a little fun, but I just went ahead and bled up the brakes. So we have good brakes on both sides in the rear now. So that's good. But a couple things I've noticed just from working on this truck for a few days. So there is a missing nut on that U-bolt clamp. Or sorry, well, drive shaft clamp, whatever you want to call it. These U-bolts over here seem loose. Maybe they just look that way, but I'm betting they are. It does have shims in it, which makes sense because it's lifted. What else have I noticed? Oh, one big thing that I did notice the other day is both sides of the frame have been fish plated on the outside. Now, I'm not too concerned because they did a decent enough job at it. I mean, it's welded up good enough. I can't really tell why it happened. Let's go on the other side and see. All right, so at the back of the truck here, to further support my claim of why I think this is a shortened long bed truck, that notch in the frame for that bed rail is really weird. I guess that's how they get the bed to sit lower. Also, the bed mount doesn't really look factory. So, between the fish plate and that, I would definitely say this may have been a long bed truck. It was definitely modified for this bed. Alrighty. It's been about a week or so since I've worked on this thing and got those brakes finished up like you just saw. And I've decided the next thing I want to try and tackle are these header gaskets, which thankfully I took the liberty of testing out some of these Allen bolts, and they all seem to want to come out, which is awesome, because header bolts or manifold bolts, especially if this is original manifolds in this truck, can be a real nightmare. Okay, that one holds coolant. Whoops. I didn't expect that. I guess the header bolts go right through the water jacket. I never even thought about that. Well, I just made a mess. Well, I'd say I drained the coolant, but I more dumped it on the ground, so that's taken care of. Let's go back to pulling bolts. Alright, got the manifold popped off. Really didn't have any issues at all with the Allen heads. I was skeptical at first, but these little guys, which are on either end on the inside, were really trying to round off, but thankfully you could just barely get a wrench on them. Could never fit a socket. So got it popped off of there. The old gaskets do look pretty rough. I haven't undone the collectors. I was really trying to avoid it because it's raining outside and this is as far as I can get the truck in the garage, and yeah, don't particularly want to lay down in the rain or that little river, but I think we're gonna have to, so we can get that header a little further away and get that block cleaned up nicely for our new gaskets. Okay, so I was hoping I would get lucky, but I ordered original manifold gaskets for the original manifolds for the truck, and header gaskets are a lot different. In a pinch, I think you could get these to work. Still covers the same area, you just got a little bit of sticking out on the bottom. But I want to do this right, so I'm going to go ahead and the headers that are on the truck are headman headers. So I'm hoping I could do some research and find the correct gaskets that would have come with those headers originally. That's the current plan. So we're gonna have to postpone the rest of this project for a few days. So I ordered up a set of headman headers gaskets because that's the header type that is on the truck, which are aluminum style, and they fit perfectly over the old one. So that's great. I then cleaned the block up and started to reinstall the header and forgot to get some video of it. And maybe that was karma, because you see in the very back there, that last bolt, I went to go install it and it didn't really feel right. And come to find out, it had a helicoil that had been repaired some years ago, I guess. And I was trying to thread it in there. I guess I damaged the helicoil by accident, and it has now started to pull out. So I don't know what I want to do yet. So that is what remains of that helicoil. That's a good sign. That means we got all the way to the end of it, because that's what originally threaded it in. So I'm hoping now that the threads, I mean, they still look okay down in there. Let me get you guys down there. The threads in that hole still look okay, so I think I can hopefully just thread another helicoil in there and then be very, very gentle about reinstalling it. Now that hole is very important because that's one of the water jacket holes, so I need to have a good tight fit. So that's why I decided it's probably best just to remove the old helicoil and start fresh instead of cutting it off and trying to use half. So while I'm waiting for the new helicoil in the mail, I have hopped over and I got this side completely pulled and back together with new gaskets in there. None of the bolts are tight though, because I'm gonna hit it with some exhaust gasket maker. That way the bolts that go into the water jacket, which I think is all of the Allen ones on here, have a fighting chance of sealing up and not leaking coolant. So I'm gonna get that stuck in there, and hopefully this side will at least be finished up. Already got this side all buttoned up. Already got the helicoil kit in the mail. These are like 10 bucks from Amazon. Pretty nice kits. This one is a 5/16-18. Comes with 25 helicoils, which is probably more than I'll ever use in my life. You got this nice little installation tool, tap, and drill bit. And we went ahead and got it threaded in there already. It threaded right in. So hopefully now I can stick the headers up there and be done with this project finally. So with the headers finished up, I needed to move on to the next issue, which was a very rough running issue. It seems like we have no accelerator pump. So my buddy Kane, who was in town for the weekend, helped me pull it apart and replace it with the new one from O'Reilly's. Come on. Going home. Well, we fixed one problem. Actually two. The manifold gaskets are all done, and our accelerator pump has this carburetor running better than ever. But in the process of doing the manifolds, I was trying to get back to that back bolt and kind of sat up here. You can see where my butt was on the inner fender. And in that process, destroyed the transmission cooler, which sucks. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get it out of here and get it repaired, hopefully, because that's a $300 trans cooler. Once I get the transmission cooler out, I decided to leave the truck in park and fire it up to see if our manifold reseal job worked out. So it is much quieter. I don't know how much you can really tell. Something's still ticking, but I have a hunch it's something belt related, maybe this AC compressor. I don't know. But it is a lot better. I think I have a slight collector leak down there, and it's running really good. So before we fixed that, really Kane was the one who fixed it, that accelerator pump, this thing would bog really bad off idle. And that has now gone away, which is awesome. And I mean, the accelerator pump wasn't pumping at all, that's why. Sounds great. So this is also a little bit of an experiment to see if this thing would leak. It's in park right now, so the pump's not turning. We're not leaking any ATF without the cooler, which you get a much better look at what I mangled on it. I feel stupid for this, but so that's the broken off guy, and it went right in there. I don't have high hopes about it being able to be fixed, so I'm going to take it to a radiator repair shop tomorrow and see if they can braze that back on there. Alrighty, so I took the transmission cooler here to see if we could get it repaired about 2 weeks ago now, and they said no because it was broken off too flush down there. So I did a little bit of research and asked it around on forums, and a few people had recommended that this unit works perfectly fine for these trucks. So significantly smaller, so I am a little concerned. It's a lot smaller than I thought it would, but we'll just have to pay attention to the transmission temps, which means putting a gauge on this thing in the future. But as you can tell, the other problem, other than the size difference, is we lose our mounting brackets. So what we're going to do is we're going to program up a cut file out of this 18 gauge and see if we can't make some sort of sporty looking bracket to hold this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and design that, and I'll show you guys what we come up with. Alrighty, you can't tell from here, but we have the trans cooler bracket all mounted in there. Ties into the original mounts. Then I just snipped the lines off the original cooler and flared them. Now they're hooked up. So that's good. And yesterday off camera, I actually did try and go for a spin around the block, and it did not go so well. So let me back up a little bit. So I've owned this truck now for a month and a half, and a lot of that time I was really just sitting here waiting for the title to come in the mail. So I'm in Iowa currently. That's where this truck came from. That's where I'm going to register this truck. And I got a title with the truck when I bought it, of course, but the previous owner, 2 owners ago, had signed the title over to the guy I bought it from, and the guy I had bought it from had never signed it into his name, which in Maryland, where I grew up, that's not a big deal, but here it is because the seller signed the title and dated it back in 2020. It's now 2024, so that turned into a whole thing. I had to get the previous owner of the truck to get me a new title. Thankfully, he worked with me. It was great to deal with. It just took quite a bit of time to send some paperwork to him, get him to send it off to the state of Iowa, get it back. So really, this truck, within a week of when I got it, I probably could have had it on the road if it wasn't for this title issue. So anyway, I finally got the title yesterday and super excited. Didn't film anything, just wanted to go for a lap around the block really, and topped off the trans fluid, and it runs really good. It idles pretty good. I wouldn't say really good, but the problem I run into is as soon as I put it into gear, it dies out. So I was doing some research. I've never really dealt with that exact issue before. And really the two main things I think it could be is either a big vacuum leak, which I've not noticed, or our timing isn't advanced enough, seemed to be a common thing that people were saying as well. So that's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure, I think I went anywhere from like 15 to 20 degrees initial timing for a Mopar 360. I'm gonna go for a little bit more than 15, closer to 20, because I do think this thing has a cam. It do think this has a cam in it. So you're gonna want more timing then. So I'm gonna go ahead. I haven't thrown a timing light on this ever before. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I did check the accelerator pump is working. So yeah, I'm gonna start with timing. Then we'll do a real deep check for vacuum leaks. It also could be the vacuum advance is hooked to the wrong port, or it is leaking. It is hooked up, but I don't know if that's the port you want. I think you usually want intake pressure for an automatic transmission vehicle. So we'll try a couple things and see how it goes. I also found out the hard way when it broke down on me going around the block that the starter's on the way out. So I've got one of those coming from Rock Auto for 50 bucks, and we'll install that because it's quite frustrating when you broke down the side of the road and it doesn't want to turn over because the starter's going bad. So anyway, I'm going to throw some timing at it. We'll see if that makes a difference. So we got the truck fired up. I just wanted to show you guys before I change anything what it does. So it's warmed up, idling pretty good. And it dies out. And it's just weird because it runs so good up until then. I don't know. Alrighty, so at this point I did crank in some more timing and checked for vacuum leaks, and neither thing affected my issue. So I turned my sights towards the carburetor and we ripped it apart for a complete rebuild. Okay, so our carburetor is all back together. You can see some fresh gaskets poking out. So I took this thing all the way down to nothing and then soaked it in some chem dip over there. Soaked it, brushed it out, cleaned it, rinsed it with water, blew it out with carb cleaner, blew it out with air, ruined a toothbrush. I went really ham trying to get this thing as clean as possible. Put new floats in it. The rear float was hung up when I pulled it apart. Didn't seem like it had moved at all since I had been running it, so I'm hoping that's part of my issue. Now, the only thing that concerns me, there's two things. This doesn't concern me as much, but the adjustment for the electric choke, the little indicator on here is like all the way buried down here. I put it back together exactly how it was, but we need to check that later and maybe make some adjustments. The real scary thing that I think may be causing us some issue is that shaft in there. So that's for the secondaries. It's got some play up and down. Now that could be giving us a vacuum leak, which, I mean, our symptoms, issues with this truck definitely have pointed towards it having a vacuum leak. So that's something to pay attention to. If I need to, I can order a ream and bushing set and redo that. But I'm going to put it on the truck for now and blow some starting fluid in it when it's running and see if it's sucking air through there or not. Otherwise, the only other thing notable about this carb was these two screws are already missing. Apparently that's a common thing to pull those out because they can back out and fall into your engine. So Holly, I think, even recommends to pull them out. Someone else already did that because I'm missing those screws. So someone's been through this carb. So should be all good. I didn't film much of this because it's my first carb I've ever done. And I just wanted to learn it without worrying about showing you guys how to do it, possibly wrong. That's enough yapping. Let's get it reinstalled back on the truck. What a treat to get to. That fuel pump is an absolute pain in the neck with this alternator bracket here. I would almost recommend pull your alternator in the bracket. Make your life a lot easier to do that fuel pump, but it's in there. Got it all hooked up. The rod was a slightly different design than the old one. Let's back up. The last time I was trying to work on this thing, it seemed like I was losing fuel pressure, so that's why I went ahead and threw a pump at it. I had already suspected this pump must be weak, because if you remember in the last episode, I found an electric pump up underneath the truck near the tank, which I assume was put on to supplement maybe a failing mechanical pump. I don't like electric pumps. If I can avoid them, I would much prefer just to stay with mechanical style, so I went ahead and ordered one on Rock Auto and threw it on there. Now, some quick research said that the pump linkage that I have, which was more of like a straight rod with then the little curly Q, should work fine, which I hope is true. But it's like 11 p.m. at night. I don't think my neighbors are going to be happy listening to me try and tune this 360 in, so we'll figure it out tomorrow. I did want to crank it over and see if my fuel pump was hooked up right, because you can get a little arm above or below the cam. Looks like it is right because it's pumping fuel, but man, that fuel looks disgusting. I don't know where that's coming from because I pumped this tank out. So that's tomorrow's problem. We'll change that filter out. Yeah, it's got a bunch of good fuel in it. Who knows? So the next day, there was a whole lot of planes flying over me on their way to Oshkosh, Wisconsin for the giant annual EAA air show. Pretty cool to see throughout the day. But we had plenty of issues on our own, which was the truck was still not running right. So I pointed my eyes back towards the timing, as you could see with this very professional video, where we were having a very erratic timing light. All right. Behind me there is the Dodge this video is about. Behind that is my dog gets very interested, my neighbor's dog, barking away. And in front of me is a very sad-looking MSD distributor. So this is the original MSD Pro Billet distributor off the Dodge. This is like a $700 part. I am hesitant to throw it away. I'm not going to throw it away. But I think this has been the root of a bunch of issues with this truck. So ever since I got it running and tried to drive it for the first time, it's had an issue where as soon as you put it in gear, it wants to stall out. Now, I did temporarily get that issue to go away after I rebuilt the carburetor, which I think was unrelated, and replaced the coil, and I thought that was my problem. I really deep down knew it wasn't, because when I went to go time it, the timing mark was still all over the place, which is not a good indication. But we drove it like that anyway, and it's proven to be rather unreliable. It just randomly seems to lose spark and has a very hard time starting. And dogs. Anyway, since my co-host rudely interrupted me, what I was saying is this thing seems to lose spark sometimes and just hard to start, has some issues. So I went to go replace the magnetic pickup here, only to find out you have to pull the distributor shaft, a bunch of Allen keys, you have to remove the vacuum advance, do a bunch of work, only to find out that there's a circuit board under here that you have to solder to. I'm not quite good enough at soldering to trust myself to do that, so I was going to take it into a buddy of mine and do it at work, but I really got to thinking about it and just ended up deciding the magnetic pickup was $50. The circuit board, if I wanted to replace that, which there was some evidence of moisture getting in here, which scared me. Like you can see the little spots of rust. The circuit board was like $150, and I found out I could just get this whole system for $150. So what this is it is an HEI with an external coil. Now, if you're like me, you're familiar with HEIs with gigantic caps. That won't work on these trucks because the distributor's in the back against the firewall, and you wouldn't have any clearance to do any adjusting. So this system's pretty sweet because it makes the cap much smaller by allowing your coil to be separate. Also makes the system look a little bit more original. Now, like I said, to replace the circuit board in that was $150, and I got this whole setup, coil, plug wires, distributor, for $150 shipped to me with a 3-year warranty, allegedly. Now, I haven't had amazing luck with HEIs before, but I have had pretty decent luck with them. And I'm hoping this one is good as well, because I want to get back to driving this truck. So we're going to go ahead and stab this in, and we'll see what happens. And the distributor went in smoothly and worked fantastic. I know HEIs are mostly a Chevy thing, but they really do work for these Dodges too. I was really happy with the kit. But we only have one more clip of video on this truck, as I will explain here in a second after you see it. So if you've watched my channel before, you will know that is not my truck and trailer. And that is because I sold the truck. Now, I had zero intention of selling this truck. I was completely in love with it and planned on keeping it pretty much for forever. But the dilemma came when I had posted several pictures of this truck in a Dodge Tin Grill forum on Facebook and had been reached out to by, not the original owner, but an owner of this truck from 20 years ago. And he was a kid at the time when he owned it. It was his high school truck. Him and his dad had done a lot of work to it. He drove it all through high school. They had actually owned it twice, sold it, bought it back, and then ended up selling it again, and has spent the last 20 years looking for the truck. So when he found it, he reached out and sent me some pictures. I'll put up here, and you'll see the truck looks identical to what it looked like 20 years ago. So he had spent the last 20 years looking for this truck, wondering where it went, and when I posted some pictures of it, he found it, and he wanted it back for sure. So he made me a pretty fair offer. I think it was pretty fair for both of us, and I really did not want to sell this truck. I also was not finished filming with it yet, but some things fell into place, and I decided that he deserves the truck a lot more than me. I sold one of my trucks in high school, and it ended up being totaled, and I will never have the opportunity to have that truck back, which really sucks. So I really felt for the guy and just wanted to reunite him with this truck, even though it was by far my favorite project truck I think I've ever bought. But anyway, it continues to live its life in Iowa. It's only about 3 hours away from me if I ever want to go visit it again. It was a really cool truck. I really enjoyed driving it, and I am hoping to replace it here soon with something equally as cool, which will be very hard to do. So anyway, I'm sorry that I don't have some great footage of this truck, as I sold it a lot faster than I had planned to and didn't really get to finish off this video very nicely. But hopefully you guys will enjoy the story of what happened to this truck and come back and see me next time.